Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. Today's guest is the executive director of, you've heard about it, the Birmingham Promise, Rachel Harmon. Rachel, thank you for being on our show. I'm so glad to have you in this setting.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So, I never met you until recently. I've heard about the Birmingham Promise. Of course, I'm close with Mayor Woodfin, and I know
Mhm.
it's a big deal to him. But how did you end up in this position of executive director? Where'd you come from? How'd you get to where you are?
Yeah, so I moved to Birmingham from Jackson, Mississippi, about a little over 3 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago. At the time, I had heard a lot about Mayor Woodfin. In Jackson, Mississippi, we had Mayor Lumumba, who is sort of a friend and peer of Mayor Woodfin. And so I knew that he was a new young mayor and he was trying to do interesting things in his city. I met Josh Carpenter, who led his economic development team and really helped build a lot of the mayor's vision and strategy around sort of inclusive economic growth. And they were trying to build a team. I had no connection to Birmingham. I didn't know much about it. And when I came to visit and talk about the role, I was so inspired by the sort of collective commitment that had been built around creating a better, more inclusive version of Birmingham. I talked to people that were in the private sector. I talked to people at educational institutions, at the city, at the school district, obviously. And obviously, folks have different perspectives, but there seemed to be some consensus that this was investing in Birmingham's people was something that folks really took seriously. And so I moved here at the time to join the city as a deputy director on his economic opportunity team. Initially my scope was quite broad. So we were looking at how to connect Birmingham residents to quality jobs in general. It wasn't really specific to young people. But I'd known that on the campaign trail, he had talked about this idea of tuition-free education. And so a few months after starting in that role, the mayor gave me a research project and said, hey, we had this idea. I need you to do some research to look at how we actually implement this. How do we design this so that it's specific to Birmingham and in our community? I worked on that for a few months and had a lot of conversations with different stakeholders. And Tommy, I thought that was the end of my road with this work. I thought I was going to hand off this research report to the mayor, and he was going to find someone to implement this. And it really quickly became, my life really. And so in April of 2020, we were transitioning that work out of City Hall because we knew, we wanted to be sustainable. We wanted to be an organization that could sort of move fluidly and dynamically, and made the decision along with several other leaders to move with the work and lead Birmingham Promise as an organization. So that's a short version of how I ended up in this role.
Um, so in Jackson, were you working in the government for that mayor over there doing similar stuff?
Yeah, I was actually not. I was a part of the mayor's youth council or youth millennial advisory committee, I think, in Jackson. But in Jackson, I was working for a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution called Hope Credit Union. And so that organization worked to provide financial services for low and moderate income families. So related work, but a little different and a little bit of a pivot to sort of see how local government works and how you actually get things done. I didn't have a lot of experience doing that when I moved to Birmingham.
Is Birmingham Promise, at least in part, funded by the city of Birmingham?
It is, yeah. So that was really, the funding that the mayor and city council committed to Birmingham Promise was the first funding that the Birmingham Promise received. And in many ways has made it possible to do a lot of the private fundraising that we've done, a lot of which you know about. We had some big news last week related to Sarah Otto. But without that initial investment from the public sector, it makes it really difficult to go to our private sector community and say, hey, we have this idea and we want you to fund it, but we're not going to put anything in it. And so I think it was really wise of the mayor and city council to say, like, we are going to put our own resources on the table to show you how seriously we take this idea and how much we're going to invest in the next generation of talent in our city.
So you've been at it now, and we're starting to see the product of your work. I think there are probably in excess of 600 students now that have taken advantage of the Birmingham Promise, and we'll talk more specifically about that in the next segment. But once you moved out of City Hall and got your own place, you're still being funded in part by Birmingham, but now you're reaching out to other people in the community to invest in this process.
That's right. That's right.
Were you well received?
Yeah. You know, I think it's been really incredible, honestly, the amount of fundraising that we've been able to do during a very difficult year to raise money. You know, 2020 was just a tough year, I think, for nonprofits, for philanthropic organizations across the country, and we were able to really sustain some of those initial gifts that we secured in 2019, or initial commitments that we secured in 2019. We were able to bring new funders onto the table. We brought Vulcan Value Partners, Protective Life, AT&T, Coca-Cola. So we've been able to bring some new supporters on board this year, which I think again speaks to the importance of, and I know we're going to talk more about sort of program specifics for our corporate community. Our talent pool is one of the most important things that we can create to better serve our corporate community. And I think the Birmingham Promise is a really important piece of doing that in a sustainable way.
Well, when we come back from break, we'll do a little more deeper dive into the specifics of the program. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Rachel Harmon. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm speaking with Rachel Harmon today, Executive Director of the Birmingham Promise. She came here from Jackson, Mississippi, and found herself in a position that she's quite passionate about, obviously, and that is the Birmingham Promise. Yes, Mayor Woodfin does have a vision for our youth, and that is the goal because they are our future. So when you speak of funding, I know there are capability. For example, what's the proposed budget? How much money do you need to keep this going?
Yeah. So our initial fundraising goal is just over $40 million. And that gives us it gives us two full, it gives us almost a decade of sort of runway in terms of scholarship, internships, and obviously our sort of operational costs in terms of staff and other things like that. And what we've seen, you know, the ideal position to be in is to endow something like this in perpetuity, where you're able to put enough money in on the front end that you're just pulling off of the interest from whatever you've endowed. For programs like ours that include four-year institutions, which we do, the price tag in terms of endowing it is quite high. It is above $40 million. And so what we've seen other Promise communities do is you'll do an initial fundraising amount, you know, somewhere between $40 and $50 million, because that's something that is attainable for communities of our size, and also bringing in national funding. And once you have a really strong record of evidence, people want to know, you know, even our philanthropic community wants to invest in our community, but they also want to invest smartly in our community. And so we want to be able to show hey, these are our results in terms of student retention. These are our results in terms of students that are employed after they finish their post-secondary degree, all of those things. And right now we have one class of students that are in their sophomore year of college. So we
Wow.
can't show what the graduation rate is. So typically you'll do
Well,
sort
but
of
that's
that first
great.
round, give yourself a couple of, can you hear me?
Yeah, I said that's great.
Okay. Yeah, and give yourself a couple of cohorts of evidence. And then we've seen communities enter into this ambitious phase where you sort of share a more ambitious fundraising goal, but that folks at that point feel confident that this is something that makes sense to really invest in.
Well, given those numbers,
Yeah.
percentage-wise, one of the complaints about people that are doing what you're doing are that so much of that money goes to administrative costs.
Right. Yeah.
I would like to think that that's not the case in the Birmingham Promise.
Yes.
But percentage-wise, I would like to know, and I think our viewers would like to know, how much of that is Birmingham putting up,
Yeah.
percentage-wise, and how much of that percentage-wise is administrative expense? So
Right.
how much is
Yeah.
filtering to the kids?
Right. Yeah. So in our first operating budget this year, about 70% of our budget is dedicated directly to student support. So whether that's through scholarship, whether that's wages for internships or other things like that, that's the majority of our budget. And that's a ratio that we think will keep somewhat consistent, even as we grow as an organization. And so that's just something that from a stewardship, both of our public resources and our private resources, we want to make sure that we are serving the community that we're intended as an organization to serve. It takes a team to do that. It takes people, right, to do that. But our goal has always been to leverage those dollars as best as we can and make sure that as much of every dollar that we get can go directly to a student in some form or shape. And the second piece of your question, if you look at this $40 million sort of initial fundraising that we have just in 5 years, we'll have $10 million that will come directly from the city of Birmingham through our agreement with the city. That's a huge commitment that, again, Mayor Woodfin and City Council made possible to say to our philanthropic and corporate community, we are putting our dollars on the table. We are making this investment with you all. We're not just asking for support. And I think that sort of public-private partnership is really important and ultimately what makes these sort of initiatives sustainable.
So 25% probably comes from the city
Yeah.
itself. So the other 75%, we know about the AT&Ts of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world. If Regions is not on there, Alabama Power Company, they should be, Southern Company, those kinds of people. How would, like what we made happen a few weeks ago, how do you get, and they're watching our show today, what do they need to do to get going and participate in this?
Yeah. I think it's a really great point. I think that was what was really exciting about the announcement that we made last week and that you were instrumental in making possible is having that participation from our local, homegrown businesses. Those are, again, we talked about this last week. Those are the engines of our economy. They produce the most jobs. They're involved in the community. They are community members, so they know from their own experience, their children or their family, what the sort of challenges that folks are facing. And so I think their participation is key. The best way really to get in touch with us in any way that companies want to participate is really just through our website. We have sort of a contact us link, and that will get you to whatever inquiry you have will be directed to the right person on our team. Of course, there's the donation component, so we're happy and are constantly trying to fundraise to make this effort sustainable. We also have companies that host interns. So if you're a company where you may not be in a place where you can make a donation, but you'd love to work with a young person and really expose them to your organization.
When we come back, we're going to talk with Rachel about the Birmingham Promise from the students and the parental perspective. How do they get involved? This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm speaking with Executive Director of the Birmingham Promise, Rachel Harmon. Rachel, from a parental point of view, we've talked about funding, we've talked about what it is in general, we've talked about you. I'm a parent. I have a child that I would like to take advantage of what it is that your program offers. What do they do to make that happen? And what does it include? You mentioned internships and apprenticeships. I've always been a big fan. You see the bass in the background. I've always been a big fan of taking the youth and putting an instrument in their hand or giving them a hammer, teaching them carpentry, teaching them something that maybe gets them out of the street and getting us all away from what we read about all the time. So from a parental standpoint, what does a viewer do?
Yeah, so we have two main sort of programming streams that we offer for students at Birmingham City Schools. So one, as you mentioned, we have internships where these are shorter term placements with high growth, high demand companies across the city. Students earn a living wage through these internships. So they earn $15 an hour. They earn academic credit for their time working, and we work really closely with the employers that participate to make sure that it's a quality experience. And so the goal of those experiences is that, to your point, students have broader career exposure. They're able to sort of professionally network and build relationships that are going to continue to benefit them as they continue on their pathway beyond high school. And they can graduate from high school with a stronger understanding of what they want to do professionally. Or sometimes they learn what they don't want to do. We have students that come in and say, I think I want to be a doctor, and they have some real world hands-on experience and realize that that's actually not what they enjoy doing.
They don't like blood.
So I think those are great, to your point, wonderful opportunities for students, and puts them in a better position to make more informed decisions about what they do after high school. So those are for seniors. We have application processes that typically run in the fall. So we're closing up the application where we're finishing we have finished the application process, but we are wrapping up the selection process for the cohort of that will start in January. But we'll have another application process open for students that are currently 11th graders this year. So if you have a junior at any Birmingham City School and you're interested in them participating in an internship as a senior, please sort of sign up for our newsletter on our website. Go to our website or reach out to the counselor at your high school. They are aware of the program and will let you know when the application opens up for that. And then secondly, this is what I think people are often more familiar with. Of course, we have our scholarship. Our scholarship serves, again, any Birmingham City School student, any Birmingham City School graduate attending a public institution in the state of Alabama. And so for that, you have to apply in your senior year. The application process for the class of 2022 will start in January. So if you have a student that's a senior right now, and this time next year, you want them to be attending a school in state, tuition free, make sure that you go to our website, that you sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media so that as soon as the application opens up, you're able to go ahead and go in and have your student complete it. Before that application, though, one thing that I will say, if you are a parent, if you are a grandparent, if you're auntie or uncle or anyone that is in relationship with a student that's a senior in high school right now, please make sure that your student and their parent or their guardian is completing a FAFSA now. Oftentimes, you don't have to do the FAFSA until later in the year, but oftentimes there's paperwork that's required. It can be sort of complicated. The earlier you start, the better it is. And that is a requirement for Birmingham Promise to complete your FAFSA. So if you know any seniors in high school, please encourage them to complete their FAFSA as soon as possible.
What is that you're calling it?
FAFSA, it is the free application for federal student aid. So it is the application that enables you to access Pell Grants, to access public loans, which are lower interest loans. It's really, really important. You have to fill it out. It's not a fun form to fill out. You have to get your tax information.
I'll bet.
But it is very, very, very important. And most colleges are going to require you to complete that in order to get any sort of financial aid.
And just so people understand, it's not a free ride. I'm sure there are responsibilities and obligations on the student's shoulder to perform.
That's right. That's right.
And
That
what
is
are
right.
those?
Yes, we
What
do
are
have
those
a,
things?
yeah. Yeah, so we have a what's called Satisfactory Academic Progress, or SAP. So that's a minimum GPA that you have to meet and a minimum percentage of your classes that you have to pass. Every institution that you attend has a SAP standard. So they're going to have a GPA. Typically, it's somewhere around 2.5. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes a little lower. And so you have to meet that every semester in order to be eligible for Promise, but you also have to meet that every semester to be eligible for financial aid in general. So you do have to keep your grades up. You have to make sure that you're passing your classes. And then we have what's called success coaches, which is a really important and underappreciated part of what we do. Those success coaches work with students to troubleshoot anything. If it's an academic issue, a financial issue, a social issue, they are there to be an additional layer of support for all of our students. And so you do have to meet with your success coach a couple of times a semester so that we know what's going on. We know that we're addressing any issues that you may have. But, I think in return for the sort of resources that we provide, we try to make it as easy as possible for students to remain on the scholarship while also making sure that they're being successful in their academic pathway.
So are the success coaches a part of your office?
Yes, they are. They are Birmingham Promise team members full-time. They have an incredible team of coaches. They work very closely with our post-secondary institutions, but they are Birmingham Promise team members, and their only job is to support students.
I just want to sit here and applaud. I really do.
Thank you.
I think this is fantastic. I'm so proud of Mayor Woodfin, and I'm proud of you for spearheading this initiative. Thanks for being with us today. It's been tremendously informative, and hopefully we'll see you soon outside of the TV camera. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll see you next week.
I am blind, but I need not see. I know this road is there for me.
I think it's just vapor and flavors. It won't hurt my kid like cigarettes.
Get your head out of the cloud. Talk to your kid about vaping. Visit talkaboutvaping.org.